tror vi drar igång nu. Vi har lite mindre tid än vanligt den här gången, så en halvtimme siktar vi på. Så att vi får nog köra igång, så får vi hoppas att fler som är anmälda dyker upp här vart eftersom. Dagens webbinar, som sagt, tillsammans med Augmentt, och kommer att handla om deras 100 security templates som de nu har släppt, och bland annat om deras policy manager, conditional access, något också som är nytt. Det är deras största release faktiskt inom Augmentt, så att det är mycket som är nytt här, så att spännande att få ta del av det. Vi har Ali med oss som är Vice President of Product, and I will leave it over to you with a warm hand, Ali, to take it away for today's webinar.
Thanks, everybody. Good to meet everyone. As Simon said, I'm Ali Mahmoud, the VP of Product here at Augmentt, and I'm happy to talk about pretty much anything when it comes to the platform, when it comes to Microsoft security. Been doing this for some time now, and I know there's a lot of questions that surround Microsoft and how the portals work and everything. We'll talk a little bit about a couple of things here. I wanted to start a little bit about our approach to Microsoft security, and I have about close to 200 MSPs that are on a technical advisory board with Augmentt. And so I get a lot of smart people that I get to work with, and we work together to kind of create a security framework. Then what I'm going to do is I'll jump into two great new features that we've launched recently, and we're continuously improving the product all of the time. So even between the time we booked the webinar and now that we're doing the webinar, new functionality has been released. That's the fun part of software development. So let's jump in, and I know we only have a half hour. I think we can cover a lot of content in this time, and please ask questions at any time. Simon will translate, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So as I mentioned, I've worked with a lot of MSPs to come up with a bit of a cybersecurity framework. And the idea here is cybersecurity is always changing. Microsoft has 200 different recommendations for every single one of your clients. There's different European regulations, there's NIS2, and there's other frameworks. And the feedback I was getting from lots of MSPs is I might have a framework or a checklist of things to do, but I don't have the tool to actually do the checklist at scale. So how do I actually do all of this work efficiently across all of my customers? And so what we've done is we've worked with our partners to couple a good framework that captures a lot of the best practices with all of the current functionality that the platform has. So everything that we see in the framework is a single button that we can click and augment to achieve that level of security. So the idea here is, why do security as multiple levels? Why span it over a 6-month time period? And the truth is, day one, we could go configure all of the security settings in a client's environment. That's problematic because the client might not appreciate all of those security settings, and I might actually end up locking someone out or breaking an email system or causing problems. And the second problem is my client is paying me a monthly fee for a security service. So I think we've got a nice blend where there's lots of upfront security. So in the first month, most of the best practices get applied, and then over time we can incrementally improve. So I think it's important to show up to your customer on a regular basis, whether it's a week later, a month later, 3 months later, and then maybe quarterly after that. Once you've built the trust from a cybersecurity perspective, I know MSPs who are really only having a yearly meeting with their client about cybersecurity, and everything else can kind of be dealt with as an email or as needed. So this framework at a very high level, level 1 is not any security application at all. It's just a risk assessment. And so in the Augmentt platform, you have that cybersecurity risk assessment. There's lots of different reports, but this is a good place to start. This is free to all MSPs for life. And the idea with this risk assessment is identify problems in your customer environment, get them interested in solving security problems, and then when they're paying you for a service, that's when you'd want to probably come back to Augmentt and buy functionality for the other levels of the product. So when we get to level 2, this is where we start applying security best practices. And the screenshots you're seeing here is a reference document that we've created with these partners. So we've actually laid out the entire framework, both in these slides, but also in a process document. And I just give this away free to MSPs. I want every MSP to be great at security service delivery, and it shouldn't be hard to do the core best practices in Microsoft. So it's the processes, it's the how-to, it's the actual steps for a technician to follow, and it's some of the email templates that you might want to be using when you communicate with your clients. So happy to share any of that if anyone's interested. After that level 2 baseline where we've turned on some of the best practices, one of the most important things to figure out early on with a customer is how do we get to 100% MFA configuration? And there's a couple ways to do that in the Microsoft portal. It's important to know that the legacy MFA, where you go into Entra ID, you do it one at a time per user, that is going end of life of September of next year. And so every MSP who has clients with MFA configured this way has a migration project on their hands for 2025. And I think that some of the functionality I'm going to demo today will, I hope, put you at ease that it's very easy to migrate from one MFA to another. So policy management or conditional access policies, that's another way to configure MFA. It goes far beyond MFA. I'm a big fan of it, but it's been tricky for MSPs for quite some time. And that's why we spent so much time working on that. And I'm going to probably spend most of the time on this webinar talking about conditional access policy management. As we go up to level 4, we keep all of the best practices that we had before, and then we just make some settings stricter or we add new settings. And so what we're doing is we're just slowly reducing who has access to what. So guests are not allowed to invite new people or share files externally. We restrict things down to employees, with special privileges and to admin accounts. We disable third-party mail services that use legacy authentication and don't support MFA. So there's lots of things there, and the document goes pretty deep on this. I've done whole webinars that go pretty deep, so I didn't want to spend too much time on each of those settings. And then really, once you've done 100% MFA compliance and you've kind of done 2 tiers of security configuration, your clients are in a really good state. And so by the time we get to level 5, I find that for MSPs, this really depends on the client. So some clients are going to need higher levels of compliance than others. And I think it's important not to go above and beyond when it comes to security if the client's not paying for it or they don't care, right? Labor isn't free. And so we want to match the level of security with the customer's risk appetite or with how much they're interested in configuring or hiring you to solve for. So that's a little bit of the framework. I hope that's helpful, just kind of shows how I'm thinking about this approach to layered security. And so when we talk about these 2 great features that have come out in the previous 30 days, I think the 100-point audit is great for MSPs who have customers with various security needs. And so what this is going to do is I could plug in Augmentt to my CSP, my partner portal. I can import data from 100% of my clients very quickly. And now I have a full security configuration report for all of my clients. And not that every single client needs 100 things configured in their environment, but you might have a couple clients that have everything needs to be configured. You might have half of your clients that maybe I just only need 10 or 20 best practices. And then I might have other clients who don't really care, and I'm just going to do MFA in those environments because I'm busy focusing on other more complicated environments. And the good thing with this configuration report is I can see how this relates to different compliances. And I'm currently working with some of our technical advisors in Europe to map to NIS2. So NIS2 is not there now, but you can just see how easy it is to toggle between different compliances. And the Microsoft Secure Score is there as well. So I can see for every item, what compliance score does it get, or which compliance item does it map to show compliance. So if I have a big green compliant next to a NIS2 item, then I know that I'm compliant for that item. And I can see the Microsoft Secure Score as well. And I'd say almost more important is the fact that you can customize the entire report. So yes, there's 100 items in there. I tell every MSP, there might only be one of your customers that you want to do that much security for. So for everybody else, you can customize the list. And so what typically an MSP is doing is they take the report globally for all of their tenants. They say, this is my gold standard or my best practice for everybody, just these 20 items. That is what I'm going to have globally configured. And then I will go back to my one customer who cares about everything, and I'll turn everything on for them. So the nice thing is whenever I log in and I look at a particular client, whatever I see on the page, I know that that's my goal. I do want everything on this list to be 100% compliant. And we know that Microsoft has its hands full trying to, create an app that works for everybody from a one-person organization up to a 100,000-person organization. And so Microsoft struggles with some of the customization and just making life easy for MSPs. Okay, so that was kind of seeing the problem. Now let's talk about fixing the problem, because there's a lot of great configuration functionality in Augmentt, and we should have time for me to jump into the product and give you a quick demo after we talk about conditional access. So the problem with conditional access, it's a great functionality. I love how it lets you restrict by country, by app. Is the device trusted? Like, it gives you all of the capabilities, but it's just time consuming for an MSP to go into the portal, navigate to the right place, create one dedicated policy, and then do all of that work all over again. And so if you've ever built a policy, I have to navigate to it. Then there's probably 7 or 8 steps. For each of those steps, I have to replicate all of the work that I did. Now I would have to go and do that for 49 more clients. And if I wanted to do a second policy for everybody, I have to do the work all over again. So the feedback we were getting from MSPs is, it's too complicated for me to give to a junior technician. So now I have to give it to the most skilled person in the organization. And it's not necessarily hard for that person, but it's very, very time consuming. And so I've just lost my most senior technician for quite some time if I wanted to do some heavy conditional access work. The second problem is there's always this fear, and this is probably the reason why most MSPs won't let a junior technician do all of this work, is because it's very easy to lock out a user. And I've heard lots and lots of stories from MSPs where it was not just anybody that got locked, it's the owner of the company that got locked out, or the person who got locked out when they're in a customer meeting. And these kind of things have impact on the business, and we just want to avoid those headaches from our customers. And then because it's time consuming, like I said, it's very hard to standardize. And so what MSPs usually find themselves living with is every environment has its own custom setup. And so when a ticket comes in or a problem comes in, I'm logging into an environment where I don't really know what the setup is, because we just do these things as we go, and people are making changes to policies on the fly all the time. And we know that if everything were standardized and I knew what I was getting into every single time, my work would be 10 times faster to solve that ticket or fix problems. So what we've kind of done in Augmentt, and again, 100% based on MSP feedback, is the idea is I want to take policies from an existing Microsoft environment, and that could be, I have 2 policies in my favorite tenant, and I did all of the work in one tenant and I love those policies, and I want those to be replicated everywhere. Or maybe I've done policies all over the place and I want to go pick and choose the best policies from different locations. But the key is, if you do the work once anywhere in the Microsoft portal, you can import that policy into Augmentt, and then it's very easy to take that policy and then push it out to any customer. So what Augment's going to do is it will take all of the configuration settings that are in the policy. It'll take out the ones that are tenant specific, like email addresses and the specific group name or the specific trusted location. But it remembers all of the other settings. So are you enforcing strong MFA? And are we only working off of trusted locations? And so it remembers all of those settings. Now I can push it to another tenant. And at the time that I'm pushing it to a new client, then it's going to ask me for which users or for which locations. And we'll have a look at that in just a second. And the second thing that MSP said they were really struggling with is, okay, I've done all of the work once. You know, it took me a couple hours in the Microsoft portal, but I've actually got conditional access in a really good spot. How do I know when something changes, or how do I keep track of this? And how do I, you know, go back to yesterday before the thing broke, right? Because that's what usually happens is we'll roll out a policy and it's like, cool, I think I said everything right. Oh, now these 3 users can't log in. I could go then manually take those users, troubleshoot where, add them back to the policy. But what I really want to do is roll back. And so since the launch, we kind of laid out our 60-day plan for policies. I'm happy to say that alerts are live. I'm going to be able to demo that today. We have the policy history view that's live in the product today. We're adding functionality so that you can roll back to a previous point in time. So let's say the policy changed once a week for 8 weeks. You would see all 8 of those changes, and you'd say, I want to roll back to yesterday or the previous policy because something broke here, or you could roll back to any point in time. And then we're working on right now, should be coming out in the next 30 days or so, applying a baseline of policies. So instead of applying one policy at a time, you would say, these are my 3 policies, my 4 policies, and I actually want to apply all of them at the same time to a tenant. So that would, you know, my goal in life is if there was one single button you could click and just all security gets applied, and it really is that easy to a tenant, and you could do a security baseline on a tenant, that's the dream. I'm very much aware that there's nuances in individual tenants, so I think we're getting closer and closer to that. There's still a couple questions we have to ask, like which users and things like that. Okay, so let me hop into the product. You can see my screen okay, Simon?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So we'll start where I kind of started the presentation. We'll talk about the report that shows you the 100 different things that you can audit. Now, I'm not going to go through every single one of those items, but this is the layout of the product. You see what the item is, what is the compliance level. It'll tell you exactly what the problem is, that only some of the users of the admin accounts have MFA enabled, shows you the Microsoft license requirement, and then it gives a nice little blurb. So if you were to export this as a PDF and show it to one of your customers, that's the reasoning from Microsoft or from compliance standards as to why this setting is important. Then I mentioned we have the different compliances, so you can quick filter the list down to those ones that you care about. And we can see the Microsoft Secure Score impact of, you know, if we had 0 configuration, we get 0 credits. Or if we're partially compliant, you know, half of the admin accounts have it, so we kind of get half of the marks from Microsoft from a secure score. I will say that a lot of MSPs have told me that just filtering this configuration report by some of the premium licensing has helped them convince a customer to move from business standard up to a business premium license, because I can go to a client and say, because you're on this tier of license, I actually can't do these settings. I can't block risky users. I can't block risky sign-ins. I can't protect your inactive accounts. These are just settings I can't do. Microsoft doesn't let me unless we have premium licensing in the environment. So it's really that simple. And, you know, sometimes customers get confused when we try to talk to them about, well, if you let me buy the business premium, then I could do this policy and I could do that thing. Sometimes it's nice to just show them, hey, this is the security problem I can't fix right now because of your Microsoft license. We didn't really talk about it in the slides, but sometimes it comes up in the Q&A. I think one of the questions is, how do I actually fix those problems? And you can fix them one at a time. So if it has a gear icon here, I can go into the product and I can configure everything. So I could build a policy, I could enable MFA for a single user, and now I'm going to enforce it. So if you see the gear icon, you can do that one at a time. But like I said, I'm all about the easy button. And so if there's just a single template that Augmentt built, or I can actually customize it, I want to take that template and I want to configure all of those items against that tenant. So that's really the approach. I used to work at Enable in the RMM space, and automation is key for MSPs. The customer doesn't need to know that it only took me 10 seconds to do the work. We're not selling labor, we're selling value, right? So you're selling going from a place where they have zero security in place to where they have really great security in place. And if that takes you 1 second, or if it takes you 10 hours, that shouldn't dictate necessarily what they pay. So this is where MSPs are making some extra margin in moving people to a more premium tier of managed security offering. Okay, so we talked about the audit. I want to talk a little bit about the conditional access policies. So as I showed kind of in the slides, the idea here is I'm copying from an existing Microsoft environment. So I would select my tenant, I would select my policy, and really you can kind of pick any policy that you want. We'll show you what's included in that policy. For the people who understand JSON and all the raw everything about the policy, you can see everything there. One of the interesting pieces is we were getting feedback from partners that, I'm in the Microsoft portal and I've built all my conditional access policies, but I don't know what they do. And you try to name them as best as you can, but usually the name of the policy is, this is the sign-in risk, or this is the trusted location policy. They all start to sound the same. And sometimes you have to make copies of them to solve for specific use cases. And so what ends up happening is I have to click on the policy every single time to read through it, to remember what it did. With Augmentt, you can actually just add notes to the policy. So you can name what this template is for. Once you go to import it and specify the template, we're going to automatically pick up that this one was an application-based policy. And so we'll say, hey, it looks like you want to require all of these settings as mandatory fields in this policy. And then, of course, you can mark it optional. You can add your own notes. You can make it your own. But we're just trying to streamline kind of easy wizard all the way through it. So that's the process of going to any Microsoft tenant, taking a policy and then importing it into the environment. And when it comes to deploying a policy, I think this is just as straightforward. So I've built my library. I have my 10 favorite conditional access policies. I want to take that policy and now I want to apply it to somebody else. So the first step is, again, I can add a description if I want. This is going to be the travel exclusion policy for the business owner. I can go, then I can specify which users, which groups, which apps, which devices, everything that I can do in Microsoft. But we're only going to show those fields that when you built the template, you said these are the must-haves, and then these are the optionals. And so again, we're trying to streamline the process all the way through. So every single time you deploy a policy, you don't have to do all 10 sections in Microsoft like you do natively in the portal. And again, if we added notes when we set up the policy, all the notes would show up. So I want to get to a place where a senior technician can build 10 templates, and these are the things that we want rolled out everywhere. And then a less senior technician can read the instructions, follow along, and we really reduce the risk of things going wrong because we've only asked for 2 pieces of information, and the senior tech has provided some good instructions on how to do it. So hopefully that's interesting to everybody. I did want to show, we do lots of Microsoft security alerting, but if you were going to update a conditional access policy, you would actually get an alert from Augmentt to your PSA system or through an email alert, what's changed in the policy. So this is the full policy, like the current full policy, the current previous policy, but we're actually just going to call out these exact things changed. And what items were added, what was removed, what was it, what did it change to? And so again, I think all of these steps, they make whoever is doing conditional access policy management today, makes it a lot easier. Oh.
Nej, jag såg du hade ringt idag. Ja.
Jag tror någon behöver unmuta sig här. Det kan det vara Kristoffer. Ja. Jag ska se här. Så. Now you can continue. I think I was able to unmute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sorry. So we're trying to provide as much information as possible. So all the raw information is there, which is great. I think for the average person just trying to solve the average ticket and figure out what's going on, getting a nice clean view where you just see the before and the after, it just helps me understand what changed in this policy. And again, like I said, the goal is to streamline everything. So if there was a risk with this user account, I'd actually want to lock things down, or if there was a problem with that policy, I'd want to roll things back to the previous iteration. And so we're continuously improving in that direction. I think that's good for that. So I know that that's a lot of information, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there are. But like I said, you can integrate through your Microsoft Partner Portal. You could import all your existing clients. It's very easy to send invitation links out to non-customers if you wanted to do a risk assessment. And then I think at the end of the day, the question is, how do we apply security with one click? How do we fix breaches and security alerts with one click? And then how do we automate all of the reporting? So all the things that are manual today that take lots of time, I just want to streamline all of it. That's our goal at Augmentt. So Simon, I don't know if we had any questions, and like I said before, feel free to ask Simon in Swedish if you need to. He can translate for me.
Yeah, thank you, Ali, for a very informative walkthrough of all these new features, and very interesting, also showing us the platform and what possibilities there are. I will now take this in Swedish. Tack samtliga för att ni har deltagit. Vi kommer självklart höra av oss. Era Gridhart-kontakter kommer följa upp på det här webbinariet. Som vanligt är ju vi en värdeadderande distributör, så att köper ni Augmentt genom oss så kommer vi självklart supportera er på svenska, som vi gör för alla våra andra tjänster som vi erbjuder i vår portfölj. Och fakturering ordnar vi givetvis månadsvis för den här typen av tjänst. Så att vi försöker göra det enkelt för er, och vi ser till att ni får möjlighet att köra en one-to-one demo om ni vill, direkt med Augmentt här som ett nästa steg. Men som sagt, vi kommer att höra av oss, och ni får jättegärna höra av er direkt till Ali om det är några frågor. Det uppskattas alltid av Augmentt. De är flexibla och snabba på att ge svar. Och annars så hör ni av er till era kontakter här på Gridhart, som sagt. Ännu en gång, stort tack för att ni har tagit er tid. And thank you once again, Ali. I think that's it for today. I didn't see any questions in the chat, so
no problem. Thank you so much, everybody.
Told everyone to reach out to you as well if any questions come up later on.
Okay.
So yeah, tack.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Hej då, allihop.